Hi, everybody. I am Sammy Joe. I am going to be your co host tonight. Mainly, I'll be behind the scenes, but welcome to the new Mr. America podcast. I think later tonight, you guys might be helping him pick a more formal name, but hang around for that. So, anyway, Mark is going to be hosting these Mr. America podcasts. They're going to be great for updates. Going to talk about some current events, just anything and everything that's going on in the industry. Tonight, we have a special guest. Tara Thatcher is going to be joining us. She is the head judge at the Mr. America. So, you guys keep your ears open. She always has great knowledge to drop. But first, we are going to kick it off with our little segment, a special bulletin straight from Mark's desk. So let's bring him in.
Hey, welcome everybody to episode 001 of this no-name podcast as of yet. I want to welcome everybody and make sure everybody tunes in regularly, as we will have updates and industry news and exciting announcements coming out possibly every 2 weeks or so. And tonight, the first announcement that we have that I really wanted to get out to everybody is that we now offer wellness, both in pro and amateur division. And as of now, we do have 3 or 4 people signed up for it, and it's picking up tons and tons of excitement. So we're really looking forward to that this year. And Mr. America, we're listening to the athletes. We're watching what's going on in the industry, seeing what's happening, seeing where things are trending. And we want to stay in front of everything. So with that being said, I know Sam mentioned that tonight we're going to have a special guest, Tara Thatcher, who is the head judge at the Mr. America. I met Tara in 2018 at the Natural Olympia. We were commentating with Mike Newman and talking with Tara off microphone. I realized, our visions aligned. Our thought process was very much the same on where the industry should be and where it's heading and what needed to be done to get there. And it was after that event, I was walking out and decided we needed to bring back the Mr. America. And she was really one of those people at the very beginning that inspired me to do that. So with that being said, let's bring in Tara and let you guys find out all about her. Hey, Tara, how are you?
Hey, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Sam, for hosting us.
Absolutely.
No problem. It's really great to have you here. It's anytime I get to sit and see you face to face, and when you come out every year for the Mr. America, it really does mean a lot to me, and I greatly appreciate that.
And it was such a pleasure to meet you, and I appreciate you so much for having me be the head judge at Mr. America. You're doing so many great things in the industry, so I'm excited for this conversation today.
Yes, me too. And honestly, Tara, without people like you around, I wouldn't be doing this. Like I said earlier, you're one of those inspirations that really wanted me to push this thing forward. Between you and Sam and Mike Newman, I know a lot of us, we've had a lot of conversations and talk about where the industry is and where it should be and where it was. And we're all trying to collaborate and bring that back together. So again, I'm honored to have you here. I don't know if everyone knows you or doesn't, but I know from your social media, you seem to be a very open book about a lot of things. Things in your daily life, things in your past, things that have shaped and molded you into who you are today. So why don't you tell everyone a little about you and why I believe you're qualified to be the head judge? What experiences do you have that make you as good as you are?
So that's a good question. And I think that to me, that kind of is, why did I pick natural bodybuilding? And I think about when I started competing, how little I knew. I started in 2006 and went to my first show in 2003. And at that point, we weren't using the internet to have everything readily available. So it was just kind of, you had to know someone who knew about this kind of Fight Club underground, bodybuilding world. So it was hard to get into. And then once I was in, it was like perpetual learning. I went to my first show and I felt ill prepared, but I think that that's really normal now as a coach, but I didn't know what I didn't know. So I started competing and I ended up doing a lot of natural shows, went to an untested organization for a little while because I wanted something that was a little bit more competitive, and found that, the things that I was good at were not really valued there. And I don't know that I want to get into those specifics of that, but I came back to natural bodybuilding because I love that I can get on the stage as a natural athlete and be competitive, even though I might not be the best physique on stage. I understand how I carry myself, how I position my body, and what starts with how I think about it, my mindset. I understand that that has a huge role in how I could do on stage as an athlete. And now, since then, I've been able to work as a judge, as an expediter, trophy presenter, assistant to the promoter, and learn a lot of things to give back to the athletes that choose to work with me, not only as a coach, but also in a position like a head judge.
Right. You brought up a couple of good points there that I want to touch on. You were looking for something that was a little bit more competitive, which is why you kind of ventured out and went to an untested organization. And what was your take there as far as the level of competition and the sheer volume of competition there?
So I think that some of us who have been in the industry, I started doing really well in my local and, regional shows, went to nationals, and that was a whole nother ball game. There were the best from everywhere there. So I would say it was very competitive. I got what I was personally looking for at that point, and that was to be on stage with big classes. When I was at nationals, there were, 30 plus girls in the figure F class. So that was, to me, that felt competitive. And I really like the energy on stage when there's a lot of people. I thrive in that. I mean, I feel nervous, but I feel like equally or more excited about it.
And that's what we're trying to do with the Mr. America. We want that level of competition to really be elevated way more than your local or regional show,
Mhm.
Whether it's a tested event or a non-tested event, so, bringing in athletes from all over the country. And, in 2022, from all over the world, we had 4 or 5 different countries represented, really gives that feeling to each and every athlete that they're doing something special, and everything
Mhm.
they've worked for is now's the time to put that, on the stage, lay it all out there, and don't hold anything back. The competitors at this year's show, as we could see, they were all, beyond belief. There's really not many words to describe them. So, the competitive nature, I really like that. I really like that you were looking for something more competitive. And I feel a lot of people aren't seeking out those more competitive stages right now. People like to, I always say, they like to compete in their own backyard. And, they're champions, but they're champions in their backyard. So I really want to see people getting out, doing more shows, hitting WNBF Worlds or the PNBA Natural Olympia. Get out, put yourself on those big stages and really get that feeling of a competition. The other thing that you brought up was, positioning your body in certain ways to best showcase your physique. I absolutely love that. I was reading an excerpt out of a book today. It was about the Mr. America, and on their judging panel, they had artists, sculptors, doctors. And the reason they had those types of people was to look at the body, look at each limb, each muscle, the way it tied in, the way it was shaped. And people that couldn't pose were at a big disadvantage versus the people that could pose. And I forget what year it was, but there was a year that there was a few people that showed up to the show. They didn't prepare for it, but they came from an athletic background, and they were always in front of a camera. They were always taking pictures, and they nailed it with their posing, and they won the show. So, that's huge. I know you teach a lot of that. your posing and your mindset. So, tell us a little about that, about your mindset, when you're getting on stage. What are you preparing for? How are you preparing for that?
So I think that's a great question. And I think that your mindset kind of determines everything. So I do something with my clients that I call a strategy session, which is talking about like, what are you afraid of? And a lot of women will say, oh, I'm afraid of falling. I'm afraid of tripping. And I'm like, well, if that happened, what would you do? Would you get up? Would you just continue on? And so it's kind of taking that fear and saying, if that thing happened, well, what would you do to get through it? And then just kind of normalizing it and saying it's okay to be nervous, but you can take that nervous energy and turn it into a feeling of I'm excited. I have worked really hard to do this hard thing and prepare myself for this. This is the most exciting part of it for me. And if it isn't, making it like, how can I make this fun for myself? And then when you're looking at posing
Right.
and stage presence, I think a lot of people try to emulate someone else. And that oftentimes feels inauthentic. And what I'm trying to do
Right.
with my clients is take 2 or 3 characteristics that they like about themselves. Let's say they feel bold, they feel confident, they feel unapologetic. Use those words to kind of design their style and create movements that work for them because that's how their brain would move them anyways. So
Right.
I believe in finding something personal for each person because then when they go up there, what they're presenting is truly who they are. And
Yeah, and
that's
bodybuilding is very, very individual. So
it
that's
is.
super important for each athlete to be able to showcase who they really are on stage, right? And let that shine through. On all the judging panels that I've sat on, people are very robotic, not necessarily in movement, but in expression, right? And
Mhm.
like you said, I think a lot of athletes are trying to emulate someone else to highlight their physiques when that might not be the best thing for them. So really finding that individual thing that drives you and puts you on stage is super important. And I've seen your clients on stage, and they all bring that through. So I really do like that. And one of the things you mentioned also was, what do you do if you fall on stage? You know, some people might not give a response because they don't know what they would do, right, until they're in that situation. But falling on stage is another challenge or another obstacle that you're just going to need to overcome to reach your goal, right? So if you want to be on the podium, you got to get your ass up. You can't just lay there. You got to get up and hit that pose. So
So, yeah.
that's so great.
Yeah. So I have like a quick story with that. I had a client who I was expediting at the show who actually did fall on stage. I was watching
Wow.
her and there was a lot of things leading up that were out of her control. She was posing and not eating. There were, just like I said, there's a lot of variables, but she went on stage and I could see her like wobbling in her heels. And all of a sudden she fell. She got back up and got back in her pose and she fell again.
Oh,
And
Oh.
at that point, she took her heels off and she stayed in the lineup. You guys, I wish that I could say that I would do that, but I don't know,
good for her.
right? I was like, maybe I would pull an Ashley Simpson. Remember when she got caught lip syncing and like she did a little jig and then got backstage really fast? But she got back up and that was in the open class. She came back for masters, like she pulled it together, came back for the masters class and actually won the class and got her pro card. And
That's That is absolutely amazing. That gives you that validation that, what, I underwent a 24-week prep or a 20-week prep, and I overcame all the challenges of that. And I got on stage and I fell and I still did it and I still won. Right. That just goes to
yeah,
show you that mindset, whether it is winning or achieving a goal, is so, so powerful. So powerful. And,
yeah,
I mean, that's absolutely amazing. Kudos to her. I want her on my stage.
right. So I asked her, actually, I saw her the next day and I asked her, you know, I wish that I could say I could do what you did on stage, and it was really powerful to me. But can you tell me why you got back up? Or what was the reason that you decided to stay there? And she looked at me and she said, I have 2 sons. Both of their fathers have passed. And if I don't show them that you get up when life knocks you down, nobody will.
Powerful message. That's a powerful message. That brings me into, an important question here is, as a head judge, what are you looking for from those athletes? What are you looking for from an athlete that happens to fall on stage or stumble in a pose? How does that come across for you?
I think that the stage to me is kind of a reflection of life. How do you deal with adversity there? If you stumble, if you fall, you get back up and you get back in the game, right?
Right.
Because if you just sit there, that would be worse.
Right.
And so even if you do have a misstep, I'm watching how you continue, not focusing on the issue, right? And
Right.
it's hard, especially because you feel really sensitive about it when you're the one on stage, because I remember tripping and thinking, oh my gosh, everyone saw me, how embarrassing, I can't believe I did that. I practice all the time and nobody noticed. So
Right.
I think you have 2 choices. If you trip or if something happens, either you just keep going and you don't acknowledge it, or you laugh about it. Like, you don't take yourself too
Right.
seriously, like, hey, I just messed up a little bit.
Yeah, like if your bottoms fall off as you're walking across the stage, like, or
I've
maybe it wasn't glued on. Like, what do? Like, you have to keep going. But as a
I've
head judge,
I've seen that.
as a coach myself, I tell my clients, whatever we do to get the judge's attention, don't let your bottoms fall off. But if there's a moment that you can get a judge's attention for another second or a split second, right? Like, let's do that. Let's try to get their attention, make them look at you.
I
So,
think a big one on exactly what you said there is eye contact. A lot of, I've met competitors that say that their coach says, look over the judge's head so that you're looking at the audience, and then you won't feel as nervous. But if I'm judging and you don't look at me, that feels a little bit disrespectful, because I
right.
want to connect with you. I want to see what you're presenting, and I have a front seat to it already, but I like the engagement. And I feel like a lot of
You see that so much on stage. People are just not engaged with the judges. Like, they're trying not to look at them. And I know sometimes the lights are right in your eyes, so you can't look straight out. It's hard to look down because the lights are just right there. So yeah, engage with the judges. Do something, even if when you're walking across the side of the stage, look down quickly, but at least try to engage
Mhm.
with the judges. Let them know that you're a human being up there and you're not a robot.
Right. And I think make eye contact with as many of them as you can, because everyone up there is giving you a score. And if you're not, like I would call it skin in the game. If you don't have any skin in the game, then why am I looking at you? Then you're not
Right.
attracting my attention.
Yeah. So when you're judging, you have a big lineup up there, and I know, recently there's athletes that have been coming out talking about, different things with, lighting and judges and why judges do some of the things they do, and questionable judging and all that type of thing. And I even know, like, a few weeks ago with the IFBB Olympia, people looked so great the day before, 2 days before, a week out from the show, and a lot of the athletes and coaches and spectators all complained that, why didn't they look like that on stage? Well, that could be 100 different reasons, right? Whether they did or didn't do something during peak week, or they didn't eat, or they were nervous, or stress got the best of them, so cortisol kind of overtook them, or was it the lighting? And for so many athletes to claim they all didn't look the way they did the day before, 2 days before, I think it's a lighting problem. And I haven't seen too many people really talking about that. But I know for me, 2021, we spent 6 hours adjusting lights with the photographer and videographers and production crew. This past year, we spent 3 or 4 hours. Everything was a different setup, so it was much easier for them to adjust everything the way we needed it. But we put so much time and effort into lighting our stage. Like, nobody should ever be in bad light, right? And I've heard judges, say, "Hey, number 13 and 65 switch because I want to get you in better lighting." Is that true? Are we trying to get you in better lighting? And if that is true, maybe we should think about where we're competing, because that should, the person all the way on the left should be equally as lit as the person all the way on the right and the person in the center. Nobody should ever be in bad lighting.
I agree. And I think that when I come to your shows, I don't really have to worry about that because you do pay attention to detail. And I think a lot of our audience, like, these are things that the promoter is looking at, and a lot of these things, these small things all come together for one show. And
Right.
the lighting does make a difference. But again, the venues that you've chosen, the lighting across the stage is great. So I have had no issue with any of the lighting, but I have seen venues where the lighting isn't great. And maybe, where the athletes line up, that's where your good lighting should be. I mean, all of it should be good, but at least that should be doable. And I would never, and here's the thing too, if I'm on the microphone and I'm saying I'm moving you so I can see you in better lighting, then whoever I just moved into that spot is hyper aware that I just put them in bad lighting. And I think that would be something that I wouldn't share.
Yeah, that's always one of my biggest concerns. When I'm looking at venues, I spend a lot of time looking at venues, looking at lighting. I've gone to other events at different venues, maybe that weren't bodybuilding shows, just to see what can they do with the lights, right? What are they capable of? So when I go there, I know that, hey, I was at XYZ show, and here's a picture of it, and I really liked what you did here, but can we get some more lighting on this side, or can we equal it out? So I know that's really, really important to me. With that being said, we also hear, a lot of athletes talk about, maybe they're being moved around too much, or maybe they're not being moved often enough. That, hey, I was never put in the center, or I was never compared to, the third place guy, and I got sixth place or seventh place. So how do you decipher your moves and do your call outs?
So for my call outs, I am immediately looking at you as you walk on the stage. So for all of the athletes out there, you don't just turn it on when you get into your pose. You come out on that stage like it's yours. And when I see the poses, I already have an idea of the people that I want to see more of because of how they began their journey onto the stage. Okay. And I do want everyone to get a fair shot, but this is a competition. There is one first place, one second place, and I want it to be competitive. And I want to make sure that that all of the judges are also satisfied with the things that I'm doing. So when you see us talking at the table, I am asking, does anyone want, do you need to see anything else? I'm looking for a request from any of the other judges to see if they want to see any of the competitors again, or if they're not ready with their placings. So I want to take my time, but be respectful of the timeline that we have as well. So if I have 15 people in the class, I can't put 15 people in the middle just to see them in the middle.
Yeah, so you wouldn't move people for no reason, just for the sake of moving them. It's all for a reason, I'm assuming. Right. And I like what you said, it is a competition. We're living in a world now of, everybody gets a trophy. However, if you show up to a T-ball match and little Johnny can't make contact with the ball off the tee, the coach might knock the ball off the tee and send him to first base to make him feel good, you know. And I don't want a bodybuilding event to feel that way. I don't want to put somebody in the center just so they can go home with a great picture. I want them to have great pictures, but when you're up there being judged, yeah, it's a battle. It's a battle. If you're in a front double bicep, you know, and they move the guy next to you, like, did you hit your pose? Were you squeezing both biceps? Were your lats open? Were your abs tight? Were your quads squeezed? You know, what's going to get you to that next position? You know, to move you up from 10th to 8th to 7th, right? So yeah, you should be up there battling, and it is a competition. I want it to be competitive. I want it to be fierce, and I think everybody going into it should expect that. You know, especially at, you know, the level of like the Mr. America or, you know, the Yorton Cup or Worlds. Like, these are big prestigious events with tough competition. So I don't necessarily feel bad for the people that didn't make it to the center, because it is a competition.
Well, and here's the thing. It doesn't mean that you're a bad competitor. It just means that that wasn't your day. And that's
Right.
okay, because not, you know, if you keep working at it, bodybuilding is a long game. You know, you're not going to come out the gate and win everything. You just are not. And so
No.
it's just looking at, you know, what you've done. And we'll say that I kind of assume that everyone shows up at their best, right? Like, this is the best that they've been, and this is what they're presenting. So that your best is going to change as you progress in the sport. But it is also okay not to win. You know,
Absolutely.
you know, a lot of people get upset or frustrated, and they want to blame something or someone. And I don't think that that's appropriate. I think that in bodybuilding, you just look at it and say, I did my best. Here are some things that I did a great job at. Here are some things I need to work on. And you
Right.
just are okay
And
with
at
that.
some of these very top level shows, like, you're going up against the best of the best, you know. So these might be people that you've never competed against before. You know, it's the first time you're on stage. You know, look at the Olympia, you know, a few weeks ago. You know, some people came out of nowhere, and there was hype on social media leading into the Olympia, and they fell outside of the top 5. You know, Big Ramy was predicted to win. He didn't win. And, you know, these competitors, you show up at your best on any given day, and you could be beaten.
And I think Daryl made a good point that I just saw, and I want to go back to moving people. If I have already looked at you and you're in first place and I move you to the outside, it doesn't mean anything, you know? So I think a lot of competitors are sensitive to where they're placed on stage, and that is projected through how their face looks, right?
Right.
Like, I see disappointment or I see excitement based on where they got moved. And I think that one of the things that I would love to share with competitors is, no matter where you're moved, maintain your presence and your posing, and that includes your facial expression,
Right.
because
Right.
you
You know,
don't
athletes,
know what that means.
no. And we've all been so conditioned to think that, you know, if you were put in the center, you're in first place, right? Or you're in the running for first place. But if the first place guy comes out and is so dominant, I don't really need to look at him again. You know,
Right.
it's like, I don't mind putting them in the wings and, you know, just pulling them back out before everybody gets off stage. So I'm fine with that.
And
So
as an athlete, I've been in the middle, and I definitely expected first or second. I got 5th place. And
right,
I was, because I had created an expectation around where I thought I was and in relation to the rest of the group. And it was a big class. We did call
mhm,
outs, and I I was definitely disappointed with my placing, and that was okay, but that's also where I ended up. So even though I was disappointed, nobody is going to change it. And it is my
right,
job to still show up, accept my trophy with good sportsmanship, and not create anything around that. So it was just like
right.
going back to my trainer, going back to the drawing board and saying, okay, we did these things that were our goal, and now we have some more things to work on. And just being honest about it.
That's you bring up a lot of valid points. I absolutely love it, and this is one of the reasons I really enjoy working with you. I really enjoy having you as a head judge. You're very insightful on and thoughtful about what people might be thinking, as you're moving them around, or what you would be thinking as you're being put somewhere. So I really love that about you, and I think as a head judge, you have to be able to make those tough decisions and tough calls. Like, hey, the rest of the lineup looks like shit, but you're in first place, so I don't need you in the middle anymore,
Right.
And as an athlete, I understand you get moved to the side. You're like, wow, what's going on over here? Why? What, did I do something wrong? Is my tan bad? Am I not pumped? Like, what happened? So that's great that you're very mindful of that. And going back to something you said earlier, you noticed your client shaking on stage. I was at an event, and it was a tough judging situation. There was a lot of people on stage. It was men's open bodybuilding at a natural show. One of the competitors didn't quite look right. It took me, I don't know, what felt like an eternity, but maybe about 3 seconds. And I got up from my seat. I grabbed the head judge from his shoulder and said, "You have to get them off stage now. This guy's going to fall out." And, he put everybody back in line, got them off stage. Everything seemed fine. Come to find out later on, he was rushed to the hospital. So
Wow.
I think as a judge, you also have to be mindful of the condition of the athletes that are standing on stage in front of you, right? We don't know when somebody ate last, how many carbs they were eating, if they're hydrated or dehydrated, so I think keeping people on stage for longer than necessary in a state that we're not totally aware of isn't really the best thing either. And, being mindful of that is huge. We're dealing with athletes' safety here and their health, right? We're supposed to be about natural bodybuilding and portraying, good health. So I think every judge, expediter, MC on stage should maybe be looking out for some signs that, hey, somebody doesn't look right, or maybe it's just their nerves, right? And they're turning green on stage, ready to puke. Let's not embarrass them. Let's get that class off stage, right? And
Right.
make sure we're doing the right thing by the athletes. Recently, there's been uh, a lot of highlights in the news that I think we should talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and I think Sam has some stuff to put up. So we're going to talk about some industry highlights and some things that have been going on now. We plan to do this in every segment. There's always something happening in the bodybuilding world. I don't know how many people read the newspaper, but I'm sure most people are aware by this point of the series of articles that have come out in the Washington Post about the NPC, IFBB, and recent deaths in the industry. And I think it's important for us on the natural side of things to take a look at what's happening there, right? It goes back to what we were just closed that last segment with. These athletes and their safety and their health is so important. We've lost so many people in the past year that have been, big names. These aren't nobodies. This isn't, John Smith from, bumfuck Egypt. Like, these are real people, real celebrity status people that have been dying. And a lot of people, they want to blame the jab and COVID and everything else. But it seems to be becoming more prevalent. It seems to be happening more often. And, it's happening to people that a lot of natural athletes look up to, right? There's natural athletes that look at, I'm not going to name names, but looking at, some of the IFBB guys, and they want to emulate them, whether it's through their posing or training techniques, or even the shoes they wear, right? Natural athletes, we look up to people too, right? It's like any other sport. One of the most recent articles is about a girl in Virginia, and she was severely over dieted. Her drug protocol was crazy, to say the least. And they found her, unresponsive in her house, and she's hanging on for dear life right now in the hospital. It says that she was eating maybe 800 calories a day, 2.5 hours of workouts per day, whether that was cardio or weights, who knows what it was. But people are dieting to near death. And, I want to avoid that, obviously, at all costs. In a year from now or 6 months from now, I don't want to be reading about a natural athlete who pushed themselves to the brink, who passed away, or who is in the hospital for severe dehydration, or they're malnourished, or they got into a bad accident because they blacked out from low blood sugar. And I think I've talked about this a lot with Martin Drake, and Martin Drake and I we agree on this, and we agree on tons of things. He's a huge voice in the industry. The judges are one culprit to blame in this. A lot of judges have been awarding overly dieted people for way too long, and that really moves the goalpost on what bodybuilding is or was, or what it even should be. And athletes are pushing harder and harder and to achieve these crazy looks. So I want to make sure that we're never awarding an overly dieted look. I don't want to say like, hey, everybody should look like they did in 1940. However, the looks years ago, we all still look at and say, I want to look like a Frank Zane or a Steve Reeves, right? Even Arnold in his best days was not nearly conditioned as some of the people now, right? But everybody still wants to be Arnold or those guys, right? But the judging, it changes that. Look at Carla Dunlop. She shied away from the enhanced side of things because things were getting out of control and the women weren't looking like women anymore. We don't want that. We want you looking healthy, and I want you to be able to compete today. I want you to be able to get on stage in a month from now. You shouldn't be so dieted down that that's not obtainable anymore.
I'm sad that this is happening, but I am glad that we are paying closer attention to it because it is happening more than it needs to be. And with the athletes that I work with, I don't do nutrition and training, but I actually started my journey as a personal trainer. So I see every season athletes who go too low on their calories. When I ask them, what are you doing? I'm not asking to intervene and tell them to do something else. I'm asking them because I'm concerned about their health. And most of the time when I ask, it's somebody who is around 1,000 calories or less doing excessive amounts of cardio, when I wish that the trainer that they chose would have just said, you know what, you're not going to be ready for that date. Let's pick something that's a little bit further out so we have more time. And I think a lot of the issue is, there aren't any checks and balances in our industry to say like these are really unhealthy practices. And for somebody who's new, and I was just talking to one of my clients about this the other day, when I was younger, I cared less about my long-term health than I do now. So I was more willing.
Oh, of course.
I was more willing to kind of adopt the do whatever it takes mentality, or all or nothing, or suffer. And I don't see it that way anymore. I think that there is a very healthy and healthy way to do this, not only physically but mentally and emotionally as well. And so it's sad to see that people keep handing out these kinds of meal plans, and we really need to look at our industry and say, the people who are doing macros, who are doing meal plans, we really need to do a good job putting health first. The shows will always be there.
Right.
Your health is the one thing that you really need to take care of. And if you hire a coach that isn't willing to put your health first, that is not the right coach for you.
Right. As a coach, I totally agree with that 100%. But there is pressure on coaches, right?
Yeah.
And one of your athletes comes to you and says, hey, I want to do a show in 14 weeks. And you're like, well, you need 20 weeks to get ready based off of your starting point. You're balancing your business with what your client wants versus like, hey, well, if I don't help this person, will that person then go on to somebody else who will help them?
Yeah.
Or you take that upon yourself to say, okay, well, this is what we could do, and this is the look we could achieve in X amount of weeks versus what we could look like in 20 weeks. And hopefully, you know, there's a compromise there, because, you know, we have to keep these people healthy. You know, I don't need women's hair falling out and nails falling off and, you know, every other fucking thing that could possibly happen from not eating enough or training too much. That's not what we want. You know,
No.
the enhanced side of the sport has a little bit different challenge, you know, especially with men, right? So their testosterone is not tanking like a natural athlete would, because they're using testosterone. So they could get away with, you know, pushing harder, maybe eating less, and they're still recovering from their diet and their training. And that goes back to a lot of natural athletes try to emulate what IFBB pros are doing, minus the drugs. You can't adopt that eating plan or that cardio regime and think it's going to work for you, because it's a puzzle, right? All of those pieces need to fit together. And in the natural world, it's the same thing. All of your pieces need to fit together to achieve your desired outcome. So I agree with you. If you're not going to be ready for an event, don't do that event. There's so many natural bodybuilding shows. You could go compete next week or in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. They're out there. They're in driving distance. Almost every single organization has a show every weekend somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not unrealistic to push off. And I would like to see people, you know, take a little bit longer of a prep and do it the right way. Don't come in over dieted. You know, there's no reason for that. You know, if you look at, what was that?
And we're seeing this in all of the divisions. You know, we're seeing
Absolutely.
bikini athletes coming in, you know, more dialed in than some bodybuilders. And we don't need that, and we don't want that. And, you know, it's really confusing to the athletes when they followed what their coach told them to do and they show up looking like that, and that isn't a healthy look, nor is it a look we wanted to see. And then they end up not placing as well as, you know, they think they should be, but they feel confused. So I think that it's just that we kind of have to keep having these conversations so that more
Yeah.
people can understand that we're not looking for like the kind of almost dead look. You know, this is about
Not at all.
health. And when we start looking at, you know, we're watching the Olympia and the IFBB pros, especially for new competitors, I'm worried about what they're looking at and thinking is achievable. You know, if you go back to when I started and you look at figure, which was introduced in 2003, and how it looked then versus how it looks now. When we were looking at it back then, even 10 years ago, it was looking pretty achievable naturally, right? Like the look was
Right.
good. It looked like round muscle, it looked athletic, it looked healthy. And even now bikini is like leaner than those figure athletes were. And so
Yeah.
it's just become such a hard thing to look at and say, like, I look at the Olympia winner this year, and if as somebody who used to compete in figure, that is not an attainable look.
No, no. It's not healthy. It's not attractive. I mean, attractive is in the eye of the beholder, but no, it's not. It's not obtainable for a new athlete to look at and say, "Hey, I'm going to look like that." Like maybe, but I doubt it, right? And not doing it naturally. So I would love to try to get, you know, some coaches to come on the show. You know, so if you're out there and you think you're a great coach, like let's bring you on the show, and I want to hear your thoughts and processes on how do you dial in a competitor for a certain division. Like I would never put a figure competitor on stage with striated glutes. Like that's not the division for you. You know, so you either need to eat some more, diet for less time, or look at a different division, right? So I think that is part of the problem too. I think we see mostly in smaller shows, not at the top level events throughout the country, but some of the smaller shows, you see athletes possibly competing in the wrong division. And, their want doesn't necessarily align with where they're going to do well or not, right? So I think, there's got to be some type of better screening process for that. Like, I'm never going to be a men's physique competitor. It's never going to happen, no matter what I do. Just not going to happen. So I'm not going to diet myself to try to obtain that look to compete in that division. I'm going to stick to bodybuilding because that's where I fit best, right? So I think that's important, and I think we've been seeing a lot of athletes jumping into some of these other divisions. It's not often, but it is happening. So I think that would be good. Try it out. Let's get back to where you belong.
And I think too, it's hard to find. It might be hard to find a trainer or a coach. And some of the things that I tell my clients are that you're buying the coach's philosophy, right?
Absolutely.
So if you are going to ask about anything, ask about, like, what are your beliefs around food? Like, how do you feel about food, and what does it look like to you? What is your goal for your existing clients? And just kind of asking questions that prompt answers that say, this is a yes or no for me. If somebody is
Right.
like, well, we just do whatever it takes to get there. That's not the
Well,
trainer.
I like the winning attitude, but it obviously still has to be within reason.
Yeah.
So getting back to some of these articles that have come out, we've also seen female athletes, for the lack of a better term, being exploited and made to feel that they have to do certain things to achieve placings. And that is like the most horrible thing I could possibly think of. Like, I understand you want to win, but you should never feel so uncomfortable that just to win a show and feel like you have nobody to go to. So I know we have athlete reps in the Mr. America. Brandon Wattas took on that role for the men. Crystal Woods took on that role for the women last year. We're going to be assigning more moving forward. Geographically speaking, so there's somebody in every area. Maybe you might not feel comfortable calling Crystal because you live across the country. So we're going to try to have somebody in your area to talk to. Or judges reaching out to athletes and saying, hey, I heard you're competing at XYZ show. I'm going to be the judge there. Like, that should never be allowed. If judges are doing that, and especially if any of my judges ever do that, they're gone. This again goes back to the health and the safety of the athletes. An athlete should never ask a judge, like, hey, can I come to your hotel room so you can take a look at me? Like,
No,
that's what's happening on the other side of the sport.
I know.
And it's just not good. I know you and I, we've spoke at depth about a year ago when we found out these articles were coming out a year ago. And some of the things that we've heard and some of the stories that have come out publicly with some of the athletes are really horrific. I'm not sure how or why athletes continue to go there and experience some of these things. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. On the other side of our sport, it is a very competitive stage. So what do we do to make all of our stages that much more competitive and give athletes that safe haven, so to speak, right? That place where they can come, do their thing, be judged fairly without question, and have somebody to go to if they are having a problem.
So you asked a really good question there, and I thought about it because I have seen firsthand some of the things that have come out in the Washington Post when I was a competitor, hearing about exactly what you talked about. Competitors, actually their trainer telling them to go to the judge's room and have them take a look at them. And it was, big name trainers. So it wasn't like your Joe Schmo little nobody. It was somebody that was recognized nationally. And
Right.
I think that it took a really long time to come out because when you do something like that, you feel shame. And shame is a really hard thing to deal with. So if if you were promised a placing because you did something that you felt uncomfortable doing and then you didn't get the placing, then I
It's even
think
worse.
you would worry about how that would look because then you don't really want to say anything, right? I did this thing for
Right.
this placing, didn't get it, and now
And that's some of the things that actually happened.
Mhm. And unfortunately, that is how people stay quiet is because they feel shame. That's also
Yeah.
why I share a lot of my story and a lot of things that might be hard for other people to share because I want them to feel like they're not alone. When I noticed some
Yeah.
of those things,
And
I didn't know what to do with it. I too am here to be a voice for women, and I work with women, and I want women to feel empowered. I do not need women to feel shame around something that can be such an incredible experience. And I think that that's why I love working with you is because you're always looking to how can we improve this? And no, this is no secret. I competed, 15 years
no,
ago.
it's not a secret. That's
Yeah,
what Daryl mentioned.
it's
You know, I've been in the industry 24 years, and I will be the first person to tell you it's not happening with just women. It's just
oh,
not.
I know.
And this has been going on. I've been doing this 24 years. This was going on 24 years before I started, and 20 years
Mhm,
before that. So no, it's not something new that's happening. But you didn't have social media even in the late 90s. You didn't
mhm,
have, instant access to information, so you would just go and just seem to be normal, right? I don't want anybody to think this is normal just because it's been happening, right? This is totally not acceptable. It's not normal in any sense of the word. You know, going back to getting a judge's attention for an extra second or two on stage is good.
mhm.
Getting a judge's attention in their room or a photographer's attention who may put in a word for you somewhere or signing a contract and being promised certain things, these are the things that all athletes have to look out for. You
Mhm.
know, I know a lot of athletes, they talk about, oh, all the promoters, they're making all of this money off of us and we're paying for all of these things. And, they're buying houses and driving cars. Well, it is a business. It is a business, but don't become a victim of the exploitation of the business. So, men and women really need to look out for that. You don't know what somebody's agenda is. I could, photographers that I bring to a show, I know them. I know clients of theirs. I know what they do in their business. I would never bring in a photographer that did questionable things. Like it's not right. Photographers, they take pictures in their rooms all the time, right? They rent a suite, for their space. Maybe that's still not the best place to go for your photo shoot. Maybe let's find somewhere a little bit more open, right? Maybe outside, maybe somewhere else in the venue, but not in the photographer's room.
And if
It's
they
not a good look.
ask and if they say that you can't have somebody come with you, I think that's a big red flag too. Um,
Absolutely.
there are things that I've been very open, especially with my clients, about that have happened to me that I'm really sensitive about, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to other women just because I didn't know. Nobody told me, and I felt like none of the women, and this is how I feel. So this is my personal experience. I felt like it was just kind of expected some of the things that were happening and that have been coming out and that women were kind of not there to help each other and I don't want to feel that way. And I feel like now the industry has become there's so much more camaraderie with the athletes. So I feel like if any of those things were happening, especially in natural bodybuilding, that it wouldn't take as long for somebody to say something because there is a lot of trust. There
Right.
is a lot of more of a like a family feel.
And natural bodybuilding it's the best form of camaraderie that is displayed in, I want to say, almost any sport. You know, you don't you don't see this. The things that happen on stage, off stage, backstage, you don't see that in other sports the way it's demonstrated in natural bodybuilding, which is why so many people, once they come over to a natural event, no matter whose organization it is, they always leave with that same feeling. They felt a part of something. They made lifelong friends. They met friends that, you know, they only knew on social media that they looked up to or they followed or whatever the case may be. And the other side of the sport, you know, I had clients in the Nationals this past year, and yeah, not a friendly environment. It's all business all the time, from every athlete, every coach, every judge, all business all the time. You know, and that brings me on to my next point is the sportsmanship in our sport in natural bodybuilding, for the most part, far exceeds the sportsmanship in many other sports, right? You don't get too many athletes, you know, complaining or bad mouthing things, you know, but there are those few bad apples that will take to social media and try to ruin it for everybody. And that is one thing that I don't ever see from the other side, right? I haven't seen an IFBB competitor get on their social media and say the judging was terrible. They don't know what they were looking at. You know, fuck that promoter. I'm not going to Gary's shows anymore. Like, you will never see that ever, 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 ever. Natural bodybuilding is a smaller community, right? Everybody knows everybody. We do see that, but for the most part, the sportsmanship is great. And as a promoter and a coach, that's one of the things I push on my athletes is good sportsmanship all the time. I don't care what happens to you on stage. I don't care if you look like you're in first and you get dead last. I don't care if they forget to give you a medal. I don't care if they say your name wrong or don't call your name at all. Smile and be humble. My father always used to say to me when I was a kid, humble pie, humble pie. And I say that to my athletes. You know, growing up, I played baseball and I played for a long time at a very high level. And that was it. Humble pie. Whether you pitched, you know, a one hitter or a no hitter, you walked off the field with the same expression. You know, whether you did good or you did bad, didn't matter. Save that for later. You know, and that goes into helping elevate our sport. You know, athletes, they take to social media and they talk about how hard their dieting was or how hard their prep was. Why would, you know, a 16-year-old kid look at that athlete and be like, oh shit, I want to do that? It turns them off of the sport, right? Yeah, I want to suffer. That looks like a good fucking time. You know, nobody. That's not the message we want to send out.
No,
right?
and I think that, you know, anything that you choose to do, like natural bodybuilding, is hard. It is a commitment, but it doesn't have. You don't have to be a martyr. That is 100% your choice, is to feel that way. And I think that we have to be very aware of how we are validating people. You know, we talked about people being too lean or getting too low in body fat. When we say, oh, you look so great, we are validating whatever process they're using to get there.
Right. And there's a lot of that on social media, right? Like, you post a picture, everybody tells you look amazing.
Right.
I want to post some honest comments like, you look like shit. But I don't think that's acceptable. And I think I was brought up the right way. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. But nobody's being really honest, right? Nobody's saying, hey, you look a little over dieted. Everybody's like, hey, smoking pot, why don't you come to my show? Like, that's not what it should be. Yeah, the validation for wrong things is no good.
And if you post a picture of you in your class and you try to use that as a means to get people to say you were robbed, you know, like, were the judges blind? You're using a picture, and anyone that comments on it and agrees with you or validates you clearly doesn't know the sport at all. I'm just going to be very, very blunt there. And if you're, here's the thing, it's okay if you're disappointed. I have been disappointed too. I deal with this with a lot of my clients. And I think disappointment sometimes comes from expectation, right? We go in, like, I have been in a show and expected first place. And whenever I have expected it, I do not get it. And it's because anything other than first place to me is a failure, right? Because I've created that expectation in my head. Now, if I go into the
Right.
same show and say, you know what, I'm showing up as my best. I'm really proud of what I've accomplished this far. I like the look that I'm bringing. And then it's kind of up to the judges to decide how this goes. But I'm showing up like a boss on stage, so you control
Right.
what you
And
can,
that's
but don't expect the outcome, because I think that's where a lot of people are getting disappointed and taking to social media when they really actually don't understand much about the sport. If you're
right.
calling out the judges, are you a judge? Have you judged?
Well, and the view from the judging table is definitely different than pictures. I've taken pictures of my clients. I've taken pictures at shows that I've promoted, and I've looked at placings in person and agreed with them. And then I've looked at pictures and I'm like, oh, why didn't the judges see this? But
Mhm.
then I also have to remind myself, my camera is set to 1/1000th of a second. That image was from 1/1000th of a second in time, right? So that's not really a clear image of what I'm seeing. Or, going back and looking at, videos and stuff, it's better than pictures, but it's still not what the judges saw from their eyes from that position. And that's a hard pill to swallow for an athlete, for a coach, even for a judge. I've judged shows where I've then seen pictures after the fact and second guessed myself, like, wow, that's not what she looked like on stage, or I didn't see his lats look like that on stage. On stage, it wasn't that. So that is a tough thing, and that is where the subjectivity comes into play. Historically, when I say historically, I'm going last century. Historically, the Mr. America would accept photo submissions of athletes, right? You couldn't post your picture online, right? And you had to be chosen to compete at the event
Mhm.
through photos. What people did was they hired professional photographers, professional lighting. Men were wearing makeup. That's when they started putting oil on their bodies, right? So
Mhm.
they were doing things to essentially Photoshop themselves to get that invite. And then the people would show up, they'd get that invite, like, oh my God, we need you to come out. And they didn't do well there. And because what that picture demonstrated was not what they put on stage. And the same thing could happen, right? So these aren't modern day problems. These are problems that go back, 85 years or
Mhm.
100 years. There was another instance. The judges were from, there were 6 judges from York, Pennsylvania, 1 judge from Chicago, and one judge from New York City, something like that. And after the show, the winner, the second place person, accused the judges of bias because of where they were from. But it turns out that the way the placings went, it was totally fine. But he didn't like it because, hey, I was from New York, I got second place, and all the other judges were from Chicago, and that's why it was wrong. But the Chicago judge, said, well, no, I had you in 5th place also, right? So going back 85 years, people thought there was some type of bias going on. And the judges at that time came out with a statement and said, hey, listen, my vote is no stronger than anybody else's vote on this panel. And that's where, some people get it confused. They think, head judge, you have more weight than everybody else. Sure, there's a time for that. Maybe breaking a tie, or
Right.
maybe how the show's running, or maybe where you're putting people. Like, sure, there is a time where you could, throw around your weight a little bit. But overall, your vote is no different than Judge 7 or Judge 9's vote.
Exactly.
So
And
it was
if you
interesting to really read that.
and if you have 7 judges, each judge has 1 vote. So if you wanna look at the scoring, everyone's vote counts exactly the same.
Right.
So, I don't know how to make it more fair. I think the less judges you have, the more their vote counts, right? But
Sure, if you have 5, each vote 20%. If you have
yeah,
9, each vote is, 11.33%.
right.
So, yeah, the more judges, I guess, the better or worse, not sure. But yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, each judge, they still hold the same weight.
Yes. And I think that it's, before I started judging, I didn't really understand either. I was an athlete and I could definitely, if I wanted to, blame someone because I didn't place as well as I wanted, because I think I would be like, "Oh, I worked so hard. I, deserve this thing." It isn't a dieting competition. It's not about who worked the hardest. We're not asking you any of these questions on stage. It is 100% your responsibility how you present yourself on stage. And if you want to
Right.
learn more about the sport, one of the things that I encourage my athletes to do is volunteer at shows so they can understand trophy presentation. Where do the placings go? How do you do that? Then you know what? Next time they get on stage, they know exactly where to go because they presented it before. If you
Right.
are a pro athlete or if you're somebody who's been in the industry and you want to judge, I think that's a great way to understand the game better. Because if you're just an athlete and you stay just an athlete, that's fine. But if you want to understand the sport, become involved so that you can continue learning about it, because you can go to shows, you can compete in
Right.
shows, but if you start working as an expediter, as somebody who does athlete check-in, you can understand all aspects of this so that when you show up, you not only know what you're expected to do as an athlete, you've also seen it from different sets of eyes so that you're more aware of the total picture, right?
Right. And that goes a lot into, the business of bodybuilding, right? It's an event, there's a boss, who's the promoter, there's judges, you have a staff, it is a business, right? And all of these things, cost money, right? So as an athlete, yeah, definitely go volunteer at a show, see what's going on, and it's going to give you a little different perspective on, wow, this promoter had to do this to get, this going, or the way the judges, organize their score sheets, or whatever the case may be. The more you know about the sport that you're participating in, the better, and the better you are to pass that on to somebody else, right? Bring in the next generation. Let's teach the next generation that, hey, this is what we expect out of you as an athlete. This is what athletes expect out of judges and expediters. This is what we expect out of the DJ, and that is the best education you could get, is learning all about what you do, or the other aspects of what's going on in what you do.
And
I'm open to volunteers all the time.
yeah.
Come sit on the judging panel. You can test judge. I could have 20 test judges. Doesn't bother me. Come learn. Come pick Tara's brain. Sit next to Tara and learn what's going on. I would love to do that. I volunteered you for that, by the way.
I'm super happy to pass on any knowledge that I have, because I've been so blessed to have so many opportunities to work on this side of it. Even when I was still competing, I was set up with a female promoter who was out of New Mexico, Kristen Kiebers, and she was a mentor to me. She ran the Fitness America shows out there like an absolute pistol. She was
Right.
direct. Like, I had not seen a woman like that. I think I was 29 when I started working with her, but I had not seen a woman delegate and just be on top of so many things. I had no idea what went into promoting. I learned quickly that there are so many things that you have to do and that you have to have staff for, that it made
Right.
me very appreciative of anyone that was willing to take on that role and really embrace it and do a good job.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, Tara, this has been absolutely wonderful. I know we do have another segment coming up. We were talking about an official name for the podcast, and some people ask, well, what kind of topics do you want to cover? And I want to cover, obviously, bodybuilding, right? Physical culture in general, health, fitness, wellness. But we could talk about anything. So I said, well, we could talk about whatever floats your goat, and hence our mascot Fletcher was born. So it's very fitting to have Fletcher on the screen right now. You know, the Mr. America, you know, GOAT being the greatest of all time. You know, a little play on words there. You know, and again, I've said it before, without the Mr. America, none of this industry would be here in the United States or even most of the world. It was actually, I believe, Bob Hoffman, one of the earliest promoters of the Mr. America, who encouraged people from around the world to also hold similar events that we were doing here in the United States. It wasn't, you know, just the first couple events in the early 1900s. It was really the Mr. America that got our sport on the map. So here we are. Fletcher, Mr. America, GOAT. So with that being said, does anybody have any questions or comments that we needed to share, Sam? I know you're busy in the background checking all that.
Yes. So let me run over to YouTube here. Not so many questions. A lot of participation though. Some great viewers. A lot of pros watching tonight. I want to thank everybody for who tuned in. You guys shared a lot of great content. Thank you.
No problem. And that's what we're looking to do with this. You know, hopefully every 2 weeks at a minimum, and as it gets busier and, you know, more things come up, we will definitely keep doing this. You know, I'm full of information I want to share and get out, and, you know, people like Tara, you know, same. Like every time I talk to you, I'm just mind blown about some of the things that come out of your mouth, and, you know, it really validates for me my choice in having you as a head judge each and every year, and welcoming you back in 23 and 24 and 25 and pretty much forever. As long as you can get here and you're not having a baby on the very day that we're having an event, then you will be the head judge. So Tara, how can people contact you and, you know, to either work with you or, you know, pick your brain, ask you questions? What's your social media handles?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Tara A. Thatcher. Somebody already had Tara Thatcher, so I had to use my middle initial. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Tara Ann Marie Thatcher, because again, there was a Tara Thatcher who beat me to the punch.
Is it the same one?
I don't know. I guess I haven't looked for a few years now, but
we should check that out.
Right. But it has been a pleasure meeting you, working with you, and Sam. I have met so many wonderful people in bodybuilding that keep me energized and refreshed and pull me up when I'm feeling down. So you guys are those people to me, and I appreciate both of you very much.
Likewise.
Thank you. We appreciate you, and I know the industry appreciates you, and, you know, the industry does need a lot more people like you. In closing, I wanted to acknowledge all of the pro winners that we had scrolling across the screen earlier. You know, Jeremiah Kenny Wright in classic physique, you know, Rihanna Hughes in figure, Melody Farkas, Mishak Oching, Arias Nares, Misty Weatherford. I'm expecting most of these champions to all return to the stage. I'm expecting our Masters champions to return to the stage. I'm also expecting some of the amateurs who turn pro to come back and debut as a pro on our stage. With some of the registrations that have been coming in, there's going to be some heated battles in some of these classes, and next time we will discuss some of those. So everybody, thank you for tuning in to episode 001, and we will see you next time for 002.
Awesome.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.